Um, my name is Nish, and I work as a developer evangelist at Xamarin. So how many of you are developers here? Okay, someone who has at least coded in their life, that's fine. Developers? Yes, great, that's awesome, right? So I'm not in the wrong place. So a month ago when Venkat called me and said like, hey, you know what, I'm doing a conference called Decoding Devops, and I want you to talk there. I said like, what am I going to speak? I'm a developer, and DevOps is too high for me, right? So he said, no, there are people who are asking about Xamarin, and we want to understand what Xamarin is and things. I said like, fine. So I'll do a bird's eye level view, or eye level view, whatever it is, right, on Xamarin. Before that, I want to start with this statement. Post-PC devices are the fastest growing and most disruptive technological innovation of our time. How many of you believe this? Yes, right? So two gentlemen, one of the guys who was in San Francisco, he was stranded in the streets of San Francisco looking for a cab. He had a big problem. Like, I mean, city like San Francisco, you should be getting cabs, right? But he was having a big, big problem. But what he had in his hand at that time was an iPhone. And he looked at the phone and said, like, what can I change to fix this problem? Today, that company is known as Uber. Do you all know Uber? Yes, it has changed the way we call cabs, right? I'm sure we used to wave hands to get the cabs, not in Bangalore, of course. We used to get auto rickshaws, though. But today, we open the app and say, Ola. There you go. You have auto, you have taxis, you know when exactly it's happening, right? Why is this all happening? Because mobile has more information about the users. There were times when PCs also were there where users used to log in. I mean, even now there are. But PCs don't know who you are or what you are. But mobile know more about you, where you are, what is your context, what is your location, what is that you like, all those kind of things, right? So if you really look at not just devices, right? We have, or not just smartphones, we also have devices. Probably I speak to my smartwatch more than I speak to my wife. Really, because when I'm driving, I exactly know what to speak to it, right? And I have adapted. I mean, we are entering into a world where it's like, it's going to be mobile. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry has some sensor coming up which is going to attach to your body, and it's going to take all the information and put it in the cloud, for sure. Do you agree? Yes. And someone else is going to make money. That's a different story. But as a developer, the biggest challenge that we all have is to program for these devices. Now, let's take smartphones. Smartphone is in general, but let's say devices itself. Its adoption is happening 10 times faster than what we had the PC boom in the 80s. Do you guys remember Apple and PC war? Yeah? How many of you remember that? Great. I was just born, so I just heard about it. So, and twice faster than the internet boom of the 90s, right? Look at that Google beta. Today, what Google is. I mean, nothing much has changed except the colors and other kind of things, but we're growing really fast. Also, the recent explosion of social networking, it's twice faster than that. So what is exactly driving mobile? So if you look at mobile apps, how people are using apps. So about 14% people are using browser-based, which is nothing but open the default browser, Safari or Internet Explorer in case of Windows Phone, and then go to sites like IRCTC or whatever, right? Some sites with them. But others, which are about 86%, are apps, right? Facebook. How many of you use Facebook here? How many of you open a browser and go to facebook.com in your mobile? Nobody, because everyone uses an app. And that is what is actually killing your time all the time, right? 32% of them are on mobile. The rest of the 24% are like you and me are wasting time on Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp, or whatever you call it as, social media sites, right? But there is this BYOB, this new beast, right? And everybody is going to walk in with the devices to your enterprises and then use these enterprise apps. So what is the key thing there? You have to realize, be it an enterprise or a consumer, you have to build apps for these users who are already aware of the platform. Which means you cannot say, hey, I have a captive customer. I'm going to throw anything at him and he's be okay with it. Right? I'm going to build for some hours and it's fine. You can't do that because people know the platform really well and they expect themselves to be productive with the kind of apps that you're going to give them, right? So that means you have to build apps completely natively making use of the native SDKs so that you give the same seamless user experience to your users who are already using these consumer apps. Now, I'm not here to talk about the different processes, but important things I want to touch upon is it starts with development of apps. So let's look at what are the approaches available in development. One important thing, nobody ships apps without testing. Agree? Yes, except the developer. But that's true. If you look at the testing, what is happening is, unlike the PC days, you could just test on a few PCs and you should be rest assured that it's going to work. Or you can test on a few browsers and you could be rest assured that, okay, it's going to really work. Or at least you can put a statement, it works best on Internet Explorer 6.6 and whatever, right? Those were the days. Today, you can't do that. Today, you don't know what devices people use. Right from Micromax to the complicated iPhone, people are using different devices. So you have to make sure you're testing these apps in every possible device available out there because the fragmentation is so very high. And another important thing on mobile world is to monitor. It's also to know how your users are using your app because you have no clue. Once you're shipped, there's some people, I'll tell you an example where one of the guys who said, okay, here's your app, but I'm getting an error. Being a developer, it's very easy to put a try-catch block and say, in the catch exception, I can write, okay, something went wrong. Have you seen this? Something went wrong. That's what I throw it to the user. But when he calls up and says, hey, this is what is happening, I have no clue what exactly happened there, right? Because I don't know how exactly he's used it. I could say, okay, that could be a network problem because my app is working everywhere else very well. But there could be some other problem. So you need to understand this whole thing. So let's look at these three important things. Starting with development. Okay, you all may know, if you are to build an iOS application, a developer has to know Objective-C, that's the language, or Swift, and use a tool called Xcode, okay, to build native apps. You all know this? Same with Android. We have Java as the language, and Eclipse, that's the IDE that's used for building Android, or Eclipse, or even Android Studio for that matter. And when it comes to Windows, we are talking about the three major platforms, right? We have Windows, obviously not the Windows Phone alone I'm saying, I'm talking about anything on Windows, Windows 8, Windows RT. You have C# and Visual Studio. Now, this is a big challenge for enterprises because you have to span out multiple teams to do this work for you. It may be the same feature that you're adding in iOS, you have to add the same feature in Android. There's a big problem because the same developer cannot do that. You have to ship, you have to have multiple teams. It's a big, big problem, right? So you would see an approach called write once, run anywhere approach. Have you heard about this? Yes, write once, run anywhere. What is it? Let me demystify what it is. It's very simple. Take your application. If it's looking bad, it is write once, run anywhere. Right? Why is it? Let me tell you. Take the browser. Okay, as a developer, I'll take the browser, put it in front of the user, 100% height, 100% width. User will not even get to know that I am actually a browser. And then use this, if you know HTML, CSS, it's the CSS which is making the app look like an app on the platform. So if I detect Safari, I say, okay, this is going to give an iOS look and feel, right? That's easy for the developer because job's done. But I wouldn't say that way as well because I don't know how many developers have tried this. If you successfully run a website on Internet Explorer, you have 100% failed it on Firefox and other browsers. Agree? What do you do as a developer? You go search for the JavaScripts, okay? And you will put more JavaScripts, and you make it more complex. And then it becomes, at one point, it is undebuggable, if there is a word that way, right? You can't debug that. It becomes a hefty problem. So this problem exists even in mobile because all the three platforms have different browsers. What people don't realize this. They go to this approach because it's easier for them to develop things on time. Time to market is great, so let's go with that. But there are a lot of people who have the pain with going with this approach. So I would suggest if you don't have captive users, don't go with this approach. Now, here's why I want to tell why Xamarin has a very different approach. What Xamarin did is we looked at this opportunity and said, like, hey, you know what? This is not the way to do it. Of course, we need to help the developers. We need to make the developers be more productive so that he can build iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. But at the same time, we cannot compromise on the user experience. So what we did is we built this whole API. We projected this existing Objective-C APIs, Android, Java APIs, and Windows Phone APIs in C#, so that as a developer, you have a single code base that can be used to share the code across. So imagine if you have to add a feature, you could simply go and add the feature. Now, the two things to remember here is you can have a platform-dependent code. That means something on, say, NFC. NFC works well on Android, and NFC works well on Windows Phone. But there's no NFC concept yet in iPhone. Of course, there are with Apple Watches, but they are not programmable. Now, so those are platform code. Those platform code can exist in the platform projects. So those are the projects that you see on the top, the purple, green, and the blue. They're the platform-related projects. But anything that is not platform-dependent can be easily shared. For example, you're taking a photo, you're uploading to the server. Now, so that's a simple server call that otherwise you would have written an Objective-C, Java, and C#, which you have to write it just one C# and share it across. You get it? Right? So just to explain to you how is this native performance is so high, is only because we are using the same LLVM compiler that Objective-C uses. So C# compiles down completely into the IL, and IL is taken and compiled down to the LLVM, and then the app is produced. So you get the same performance. In case of an Android, we just released the ahead-of-time compilation, but there is also a just-in-time compilation where mono runs instead of the Dalvik runtime, which is the usual one. So I'll go into the details if you want to talk more about how these things work. Because the next thing is the coffee. So I'm standing in between the coffee and you. So I'll try to make it really, really fast. So if you have any questions, we can meet at the coffee, and I can take it forward from there. Now, the question comes, all right, so let me take the Xamarin approach. But what is the guarantee that you are going to support everything that is available in iOS and Android? But let me tell you the past. iOS 7, 11 a.m. in the morning, Apple says they're not, the support for iOS 7. 5 p.m., Xamarin says, here's the support for iOS 7 for C# developers. There's no magic here. How do we do that? We have the same level of access to Apple, just like you, if you're a beta developers, right? Beta testers. You have that same access. So during the beta, we go in and write bindings for it. We make sure that these APIs are written in C# as well, so that you have the corresponding bindings. So within 1 or 2 weeks, we make sure it is released in the alpha so that you guys can try. But thereon, we go on fixing the things and making the product much more awesome. Now, what other things? You have, I said, you cannot restrict yourself to smartphones alone. Today, you have glasses, Google Glass, Apple Watch. I'm doing a talk on .NET variables in Great Indian Developer Summit next week. So I'm completely going in depth on how to do a talk, or how did you configure your Apple Watch and program it. And I'm just a C# developer. I don't even know what Apple gives. I don't even know Objective-C. I'm able to do that. That's only because it's the mono which is below, which is doing the binding for it. So as a developer, I react very quickly, right? I can learn Apple Watch. Now, who imagined it? Apple Watch is going to come to India, maybe, I don't know, next few more months, right? But still, even before that, I'm ready with my problem is solved, right? Not just Google Glass, Android Wear, or anything which comes on wearable with Android also will be supported in Xamarin very soon. What it technically means is everything in C# that you write can run on 2.6 billion devices, including those Windows that is already available in the world. Okay, so I was supposed to show you demos, but due to some time crunches, I'm just canceling that. But we can do demos if you are interested to see how exactly this works. Now, you have to test all these things on real devices. When I say real devices, now you'd be thinking, how would I go? I can obviously go and buy Micromax mobiles, maybe 5 of them, 6 of them, it's still fine. But there are some huge amount of market there. How do you get Xiaomi? Or how do you get OnePlus, right? There's so many devices there. How do you test in all these things? Well, we have a concept called Xamarin Test Cloud, which is, we actually acquired a company called Less Painful, which has an open source technology called Calabash. And using Calabash, you can do automation scripting and test your Android and iOS apps on real devices using instrumentation framework, of course. So what we did is we extended to the test cloud, which means in Denmark, in fact, last 2 weeks ago, I shipped about 40 Micromax phones from India to Denmark, because we have test cloud data center where we have real devices managed by robots, where you upload your APK files or the app files and run it on real devices, and you have screen-by-screen test on what exactly is happening on every test, what exactly is happening. And it's not restricted to Xamarin developed apps. You can, any developed apps, right? It could be even hybrid developed apps. You can test it on these things because they are tested in real devices. Okay, last thing of the conference, of my talk, is the real-time monitoring. As I told you before, you need to understand what your users are up to. There are situations where people have had issues with their SD card, or they had issues with the network, or they had issues with something else. But you really need to know what exactly is this issue and handle them gracefully. To do that, there is something called a Xamarin Insights as well, which is in the preview stage, very early stage, where you upload your, you're not exactly upload, you write 2 lines of code in your data app, compile it, ship it, but we take care of capturing every information that's available and send it back to the cloud. So the best thing is it also captures what's your battery level, what are the system settings. All the system details are also tracked. Also the user, if he has logged into Facebook, maybe you have a social connect. So you're logged into Facebook. Facebook has given a wrong authentication key, so you can track all those kind of things. So it's a real authentication, real management of things. All right, so with that, I'll open up for the questions. I still have 8 minutes, which is good. Any questions? Thank you so much.
Requesting Ms. Vinita from Wipro to kindly come on stage and present a memento and thank our speaker. Ms. Vinita from Wipro, requesting you to kindly come on stage. Let's thank our speaker. Thank you so much.